Tim?
Yes, I as I say, apologies if I was contributed to that topic going on. It's a fascinating one, and it does actually relate to Doug quite considerably. Those of you who've not been in Doug for a long time won't know that actually Doug originated back in 1998 as part of the process of making the first census in 2001 an open data set. My predecessor, Keith Dugmore, and I remember Ian White, I think it was, who was in ONS at the time, got together, and Doug was created in order to initially to build the business case for the commercial use of any open data set. And so census has and will, I'm sure, remain an integral part of Doug's existence. And it's very exciting to have then seen it move along. We had a lot to do with the output areas as well. And Keith's last contribution and his legacy was really also enabling commercial organizations to have access to the anonymized data, so, to be accredited researchers. Up till Keith's hard work, we were seen as beyond the pale because we made a profit, and that clearly couldn't be to the public good, and so we were excluded from access. But I don't know anybody else who's also become an approved researcher. It's a very good data sets that you can get hold of. So I just added that in because this is really an update on membership and where we're planning to go and what we're planning to do. As you all know now, because you're here, we decided to move it to having having monthly meetings, but shorter and virtual, so that we can keep together. We'd begun to do that during some of COVID as well, because people tended to like the cage rattling options. And that reminds me, Steve, your question at the very end about what do we think as a group of people who get access to data who are somewhat unskilled, shall we say. I often say you can when people talk about the democratization of data, you can give people a chisel. Sometimes that makes a pile of rubble, and other times it makes a statue of David. And people sometimes seem to forget that when it's data, that skills can be misused. But I think it's a great topic for us to discuss, because it's actually pertinent not just to the census, but how access to data inside our organizations gets mediated around, because people quite rightly want access, but do they use it correctly? And I'll come back to that in a minute. So what we're hoping to do, and the next thing I need to mention, is the conference. So that is due in October. Jan will, I'm sure, confirm what the actual date is. I should remember. I'll give her a moment to answer the question. Yeah. So that we had some catch-ups, because I know I went off the planet a bit with my COVID and various other issues in my personal care responsibilities I've got. But we, having caught up with the members, and one of the topics I asked was about the potential subjects for this conference. The one which caught my imagination and has led me down it most was to look at how we as analysts begin to contribute to net zero. And one of the reasons why it caught my imagination, firstly, other than it being a high topic, was previously when we had the conference, we'd looked at how we as analysts could support the crisis, the lockdown and all those short-term changes that were going on. And it was how to do rapid things and not get lost in them. And whereas net zero, whilst some people like to position it as a crisis, is still something which takes a long term. It's certainly not something that's apparent in your day-to-day experience, and hence why it can get forgotten. So that contribution of an analyst to those long-term strategic perspectives, I think, is a really interesting thing to think about, and net zero is a good excuse almost for doing that, if you like. So I'd like to just get everybody's sort of confirmation that I've not gone down a rabbit hole too far, and also to make you wary that I will approach you all to see if you've got anything you might contribute to the conference, or someone within the organisation you think might be relevant. And I don't want to close it down too much. So it could, for example, be that actually, whilst it's not, the analysis is not being done directly for net zero, if some analysis is being doing, say, on the supply chain, which is coming to issues not just for net zero, just in the current crisis and various, and with fuel going up, the supply chain is going to become a really significant issue. As I think it's Steve, it was your partner, wasn't it, who was working in the dog collective. Those businesses where a lot of travel takes place are clearly going to be heavily hit. And so, so just analysis of supply chain, for example, and different ways. Other issues about the supply chain might just be about stocking inside stores, and whether you want to, whether you can localize the store would fit again inside these net zero things. So I don't want you to. I'd like you to be quite what's the word? Lateral in your thinking about what this is, because I think that's the case as well about how long-term issues need to be addressed, in that they take long-term things. I go back to Martin's analogy of throwing the cards up in the air, seeing where they land. The consequences come out in quite long-term things. And I'm conscious of time now. I don't want to shut Paul up, and I know I'm the main culprit for making chair people have a difficulty keeping to time. But the last thing I want to mention is in this structure, I know people keep asking what Doug is for at the moment, if you like, and it was very clear at the beginning. It was initially for getting the census open. Then it became about really that whole mission to create as much open data as possible, and it was very successful in doing that. That can remain a thing, but my other focus is on making sure people are seen as a critical part of analysis, and it was partly why I changed the name to Data Analyst User Group. But that whole idea that you can never let data run itself, and the human has a contribution to that output process in a number of different ways, and I've used and been advocating that we use the Office of Statistics Regulations Code of Practice, which talks about three legs, about integrity, competence, and reliability as the three legs that we do. And I want us to, each of the meetings will have an element of those. And in trying to frame that discussion about the Code of Practice and how analysts work, I mean, in my own head, trying to articulate what the big challenge of an analyst is. And the way I'm talking about at the moment is the fact that we have to live and articulate and work in three different worlds. One is what is numerical, about this, I guess, statistics. The other is digital, about just making data work. And the third is you might call it cerebral. It's the way people actually discuss and communicate with each other. And what I've become conscious of is actually that those different worlds create different assumptions and different instincts. So if you live your life in the number world, independence makes a whole lot of sense, and the thing's static. If you live your life in the communication world, then it's a narrative is most important. And I'm conscious of time. I'm about to go on a really big hobby horse and give you a whole narrative, which I'll save till the next meeting, about how I think those things create challenges for us in terms of communication and the way we use the same words but mean quite different things and have different assumptions. And it feeds back, hopefully nicely, Steve, to what you were discussing about people who are using data in different contexts and not aware of the issues that have arisen because it's a number. We're counting at various different points. I'm going to come back and leave it at that, and look and remind you. I think that it's sadly, well, it's not sadly, I guess. It's time for the membership things to be sent out. So I know Jan will be sending out one of those happy letters to ask about membership. But I'm going to stop. 10 minutes left. And as people learn about me, I like the sound of my own voice too much, probably, for everybody else's good. Any questions at this particular point? First, I need to just check you're all okay with the conference theme.
Which is on the 21st of October.
Thank you, Jen.